Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. First of all, apologies for my absence, but obviously we've had quite a lot of drama, and fortunately it was a significantly better response, I think, to what happened. It's not far away from my office, actually. I wasn't in the office, and the guys who work here told me that they could hear it all happening. It's about 700 meters. I pray for the departed, and I hope that we're not going to see something like that again. Political reflections, I return to Ryszard Kapuściński. If the crowd disperses, goes home, does not reassemble, we say the revolution is over. And that triggered in my mind because of what's happening in Sudan, where the Sudanese security forces deployed in numbers on Thursday as demonstrators threatened to march on President Omar al-Bashir's palace to demand his resignation after a month of escalating protests. Simultaneous protests were called in 11 other cities. Demonstrations have since escalated into broader protests against Bashir's 3-decade rule. 24 people dead, according to officials. Human rights have put the death toll much higher. There's definitely a correlation between the rate of inflation and this kind of thing. And I think once you see inflation spike, that is the most dangerous moment for any regime. This regime is particularly egregious. And at one point they were threatening to march on the presidential palace. Sudan has suffered from a chronic shortage of foreign currency since the South broke away in 2011, taking with it the lion's share of oil revenues. Soaring inflation that has seen the cost of food and medicines more than double, and frequent shortages in major cities, including Khartoum. Chris Christie in the Times, Trump's administration has become a revolving door of deeply flawed individuals, amateurs, grifters, weaklings, convicted and unconvicted felons. The presidency went wrong, Mr. Christie argues, and let me finish, when Mr. Trump began taking advice from his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who steered Trump from poor decision to poor decision, Mr. Christie says. And then Michael Cohen says, as for the Wall Street Journal article on poll rigging, what I did was at the direction of and for the sole benefit of President Trump. I truly regret my blind loyalty to a man who doesn't deserve it, he said. Umer H. searching for a happy Brexit is therefore a fruitless exercise. It's like living in a dream world of corridors which all end in the same place. The problem is the dream, not the corridors. Good luck to the representatives of the nation who have to implement a thing which doesn't exist, said Emmanuel Macron. He also added the EU referendum was manipulated by a lot of what we call fake news, and gives his prediction on what will happen next. Corbyn, and this is a plot twist, says a second referendum could be needed. Labour leader gave his strongest backing so far to the idea that a second referendum could be needed to settle Brexit. If support for the Labour alternative is blocked, our duty will then be to look at other options, including that of a public vote, he said. May's talks are phony and a stunt because she is refusing to take the prospect of a no-deal Brexit off the table, Corbyn told an audience. And that triggered me last night. I tweeted, timestamp, cable was at 129.70. I think it's a buy now that Corbyn says a second referendum could be needed. And then we learned from a YouGov poll, 56% want to remain, 44% want to leave. You can see that it's gone directionally in favor of remain. And I tweeted, what is the market? Corbyn in 10 Downing Street within 12 months. Because for a long time I felt it had been a political conundrum that Corbyn had been recalcitrant, refusing to pivot on Brexit and surge into 10 Downing Street on a youthquake wave. I think he's going to do that. Very interesting article in the American Interest. Deng Xiaoping famously warned, opening the windows would let in flies as well as fresh air, he said. In the wake of Tiananmen, those atop the CCP who might have been willing to contemplate eventual liberalization were purged. Deng and his remaining colleagues then launched a three-pronged program to counteract and contain the potentially destabilizing political effects of continued economic reform. By allowing the Chinese people to enjoy more of the fruits of their labors, the regime hoped to win their loyalty, or at least their acquiescence. In addition, Beijing began greatly to expand its investments in the tools of surveillance and repression, including multiple domestic security forces, patriotic education, indoctrination, strengthening the Great Firewall, social credit system that will use facial recognition software and big data analytics to monitor activities, track the movements, assess the political reliability of virtually every man, woman, and child in China. What Xi Jinping and his colleagues have in mind is not a transitional phase of authoritarian rule to be followed by eventual liberalization, but an efficient, technologically empowered and permanent one-party dictatorship, an illiberal version of the end of history. And indeed, that's very correct. In the extreme version, edition is seen in Xinjiang, in point of fact, which is just an outrageous situation.